How to create an Amazon S3 bucket. I'll try to keep it plain and simple for you guys today. My name is Nitin Livero. I am an AWS certified cloud solutions architect, and I work for a private company as a cloud solutions administrator in Toronto, Canada. So let's jump right in. So this is your AWS management console. If you don't already have an AWS account, please go ahead and create one. You're gonna get a lot of free tire to play around with AWS. So let's go to services and look for S3, and there you have it. That's your Amazon S3 console. I already have a few buckets created for my testing purpose. Let's go ahead and create one right now. So click on create bucket, give the bucket a name, make sure that the bucket name is always unique. All the buckets that are created in AWS environment needs to have a unique name, or else it wouldn't let you create a bucket. So no two buckets have the same name in AWS. So I'm hoping this name is not there. I'm just going to go ahead and create the bucket. And let's see if it has created a bucket. There you go. So it has created a bucket for me. So I haven't made any changes to the properties or the permissions or the way of management on this bucket. It's as default as an S3 bucket can be. Now let's go ahead and try to upload an image to this bucket. So all the files inside an AWS S3 bucket is called an object. So let's go ahead and add an object, which for my case is going to be an image, and I'm just going to upload it. I'm not going to make any changes to the permissions of the file as well. There you go. So as you can see, I have one image or one file inside the S3 bucket. So each S3 object, which is in an S3 bucket, has an object URL, and which is this one for this particular object, which is an image. So let's see what happens if we click on that image. It says access denied. What does that mean? So as I mentioned before, I created this S3 bucket called Nitin Livero 02 with default permissions. So default permissions for an S3 bucket is to be private. So that means that nobody would be able to access anything which is inside that bucket. So buckets are basically managed with two kind of permissions. You can manage the bucket using your access control and also with the bucket policy. So this is where you have to play around with the permissions to satisfy your use case. So the same thing applies to the objects which are actually uploaded into the S3 bucket. So let me show you how that works. So let's just go ahead and create another bucket this time. I'm just gonna call it 3. So depending on your use case and your geographical location, you can choose any region in which you want your bucket to be. And let's click on next. And you can also set like multiple properties like the versioning of the bucket, the encryption, a lot of other things. I'm not going to go into detail on that today. And as I mentioned before, you have two ways in which you can access the control on the bucket. One is using the ACL, which is the access control list. Another one is using the bucket policies. So by default, the ACLs and the bucket policies are blocking everything, anything public, it's blocking. So let's try removing the block from the ACL level, and let's try to create this bucket. So this is just for review of all the options that you selected. So as you can see here, I have set these two permissions of ACLs as false, and let's try to create this bucket. And there you have it. So the bucket is created. So right away you can see the difference between these two buckets. So the access level, if you see for the first bucket that I created, says the object bucket and the objects are not public. But if you look at the second one, it says the objects can be public. That is because of the permissions that we selected for this particular bucket on the bucket access control list. So let's go ahead and try to put an object into the bucket. I'm just gonna add the same file. I'm just gonna upload this one right away without any property change on the object, and it is a success. And let's see what happens if I click on the URL of this object. It again gives me an access denied. Why? It is because even though we changed the permissions on the bucket, and even though the access said the objects can be public, we didn't make any changes to the permissions or the access of this particular object called one.jpg. So how do we do that? Let's go ahead and upload another object. And let's just try to go through the permissions that can be set for this particular object. So you can see you can have multiple level permissions set, and this is where you manage the public level permissions. Let's say you want to host a static website in S3. That means like you want your pictures and all the other components of your website to be accessible publicly. You need to have read access to those objects. So let's go ahead and grant them read access, and right away AWS gives you a warning saying this object has public read access. So do you basically AWS is basically asking us, do you really want it to be public? That's just a warning. Let's go ahead and upload this object. Also, it would give you a different services that S3 provides based on the way it is stored. This is for a longer conversation and longer video. I'm going to skip that as well. Next, and let's upload. That is successful as well. So now let's go to the second object and try to access that. There you go. So that means like you have multiple levels of permissions by which you can control and access to S3 bucket on the bucket level as well as the object level. There is a lot to play around with the permissions and the properties of the bucket itself and the objects which are inside the bucket. So if you have any questions, please comment them below and I'll try to answer it as much as possible to my knowledge. And if you want a longer videos with a little bit more in-depth view of all these things, please let me know as well. I'll try to create a new video for that as well. So thank you so much for watching and hope to see you guys soon. Thanks.